In the heart of Beverly Hills, billionaire Nathaniel Davis thought he had it all. But he didn't know the secret that his maid, Maya Carter, was hiding. And tonight, everything changes. He decided to follow her, a decision that would unravel everything he thought he knew about the woman who cleaned his floors. But what he witnessed next shattered his entire perception of her, and it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about people who serve the rich. What Nathaniel thought was a simple maid's life. A lie. What he thought he understood about her. Completely wrong. What did he discover? You won't believe it. Before we dive deeper, comment below where you're watching from and the time. We'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Nathaniel Davis, the billionaire CEO, had spent his life building an empire from the ground up. But tonight, as he stood in his opulent Beverly Hills mansion, he was facing a dilemma that had nothing to do with money or power. The woman who had been working for him for years, Maya Carter, had always seemed ordinary, just another face in his endless circle of staff. But something had changed. Over the past few weeks, Nathaniel had noticed the odd details, how Maya always left right after her shift, but never went straight home. She would walk through the gates of his estate, but there was no predictable path. She never seemed to take the same route, and that intrigued him. At first, he brushed it off. She was just a maid, after all. But curiosity gnawed at him. Why was she acting so strangely? Why was she so secretive? He'd caught glimpses of her, quiet moments when she didn't know he was watching. She never spoke much, but when she did, there was a sharpness in her eyes, a quiet confidence that didn't match the role she played. One evening, he decided to follow her. It was reckless, but something inside him couldn't resist the urge to know the truth. He watched her from a distance, his footsteps muffled on the marble floors as he crept down the hall to the grand staircase, the large windows offering a clear view of the gates. Maya stepped out of the house, walking briskly toward the sidewalk. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but this wasn't what he had imagined. She wasn't headed home to some quiet, modest apartment in the suburbs. No. Instead, she moved through the streets of Los Angeles, her pace unwavering, as though she had a destination, a purpose. Nathaniel followed from a distance, staying out of sight. The city lights blurred in the distance, but his focus remained solely on Maya. She turned onto a street he didn't recognize, a neighborhood far removed from the one she'd served in. The contrast was stark. Luxury gave way to crumbling buildings and narrow, crowded sidewalks. This was not the world of Beverly Hills. Maya slowed as she approached a rundown building, one that looked nothing like the homes he was accustomed to. The building, tucked between two smaller businesses, was a far cry from the polished exterior of the mansion she worked in. Nathaniel stopped in his tracks, his breath caught in his throat. What was she doing here? She entered the building without hesitation, vanishing through the door. Nathaniel stood frozen, his mind racing with questions. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected the life of the woman who cleaned his floors to be so different. He was no stranger to secrets, but this was something he hadn't been prepared for. He knew he couldn't just let it go. There was more to Maya than he'd ever imagined, and tonight, he'd find out what. Nathaniel's curiosity had been piqued, but what he would uncover next would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he had dismissed as just another maid. Nathaniel couldn't sleep that night. His mind replayed the image of Maya disappearing into that building, and the more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. What was she doing there? Who was she meeting? He had to know. The next day, as Maya went about her duties, he found himself watching her more closely than usual. Every movement, every interaction seemed charged with a new mystery. There was an unfamiliar tension in the air, one that he hadn't noticed before. By the evening, he was back at it. As the sun set over the mansion, he slipped into his car, making sure to stay out of sight. This time, he wasn't just following her out of idle curiosity. He needed answers. Maya, as usual, walked out the front gates of the mansion. Nathaniel's heart beat faster as he started the engine and followed her once again. She took the same route, walking down the familiar streets of Beverly Hills, but as they approached the city limits, something shifted. This time, instead of taking her usual turn toward the more affluent areas, she veered off toward a part of the city he never ventured into. His grip tightened on the wheel, heart pounding in his chest. The lights dimmed, and the sleek cars and manicured lawns faded as they entered a much rougher neighborhood. The roads narrowed, and the buildings grew older, their paint peeling and windows boarded up. The streets were alive with people, but it was a different kind of life. A life Nathaniel knew nothing about. Maya walked with purpose, ignoring the looks of people as they passed her by. She was in her own world, determined, confident, everything Nathaniel hadn't expected. She turned onto a narrow street and approached an old building that seemed to have seen better days. Nathaniel's curiosity reached its peak. He pulled the car over to the curb, parking a few blocks away to remain unnoticed. From this distance, he watched as Maya walked up to the entrance of the building, where a group of children was waiting. Nathaniel squinted. She wasn't just walking into some random building. She was meeting them. These kids. They ran toward her, and she embraced each one with a warmth that stunned him. They weren't the only ones. A few other people appeared, some bringing bags of food, others with boxes of clothes. Maya took charge. She directed everyone, organizing a small event in the parking lot, handing out food, clothes, and supplies. There was a sense of urgency in her movements, a clear mission she was on. Nathaniel watched from his car, completely transfixed, as Maya worked tirelessly, ensuring each person got what they needed. He had never seen her like this. The woman who had always been so quiet, so reserved in his mansion, was a completely different person now, strong, confident, and undeniably alive. He couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, something he hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just some maid. She wasn't just here to clean his mansion. She had a life of her own, one that was far more complex and far more meaningful than he could have ever imagined. Nathaniel sat there for a long time, unable to look away, his thoughts spiraling. What kind of woman had he been dismissing all this time? How had he misjudged her so completely? As the night wore on, Maya finished up the event, giving her final instructions to the volunteers. She hugged each of the children one more time, then turned and walked back into the building, disappearing into the night. Nathaniel sat in his car, stunned. He couldn't shake the image of Maya, surrounded by the people she was helping, her strength radiating through every gesture. This was the woman he had underestimated. This was the woman who had quietly been living a life he had no idea about. As he finally drove away, Nathaniel's mind was racing. He knew he had only scratched the surface, but now he couldn't stop himself. He had to know more, and this time he wouldn't be the one left in the dark. The next morning, Nathaniel woke with a lingering sense of unease. He couldn't shake the images from the night before. Maya, standing in the middle of that gritty parking lot, distributing food with a warm smile, completely at ease in a world far from the luxury he'd surrounded himself with. It was as though he had witnessed something he wasn't meant to see. He tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on work, but it was no use. All he could think about was Maya and the life she had kept hidden from him. She had been nothing more than a servant in his eyes, someone who swept his floors, cleaned his office, and served him coffee. Yet, what he had seen last night painted a completely different picture of her. As the day wore on, Nathaniel found himself drawn to his office window, his thoughts constantly drifting back to Maya. He knew he had to get to the bottom of this. Something wasn't right, and he couldn't let it go. When Maya arrived that afternoon, her usual demeanor was the same, polite, quiet, and reserved. But this time, Nathaniel couldn't just look past her the way he had before. He studied her closely, noting the way she carried herself. There was a confidence in her that he hadn't noticed before. A quiet power that seemed out of place in a woman who cleaned his mansion. "Ms. Carter," Nathaniel said, his voice softer than usual. "Could you come into my office for a moment?" Maya paused, looking at him briefly before nodding and walking into the room. Nathaniel motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit down," he said, trying to sound casual, though his mind was racing. "I just wanted to ask you, how was your night?" Maya raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the question. "It was fine, sir," she replied coolly, her voice neutral, betraying none of the emotions that had surfaced when she had been out helping those kids. "Do you have a lot of these events? The ones you attend after work?" Nathaniel pressed, trying to mask the curiosity in his tone. Maya stiffened slightly, but kept her expression unreadable. I do what I can when I'm off the clock. Nathaniel felt a flicker of guilt, knowing she was likely sensing his intrusion into her personal life. But he couldn't stop himself from asking. He needed to understand. I saw you last night, Nathaniel said quietly. You were with a group of people, helping them. I had no idea you were involved in something like that. Maya's eyes flashed with something, defensiveness maybe, or frustration, but she quickly masked it. I've been doing this for a long time, she said, her voice slightly harder now. It's not something I need to explain. There it was, the wall, the one he'd been afraid of. Maya was closing herself off again, and Nathaniel felt that familiar tension building in the room. The pull between them was palpable, but there was also something else, something deeper. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Why didn't you ever mention it? Nathaniel asked, his voice more gentle now, almost apologetic. Why didn't you tell me about your work? Maya's gaze hardened, and she stood up slowly. You never asked, she said, her voice quiet but firm. You've always seen me as just your maid. So no, I didn't tell you. Because I didn't owe you an explanation. Nathaniel opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. She was right. He had never asked. He had never taken the time to look beyond the surface of who she was. And now, it seemed like Maya wasn't interested in giving him the answers he wanted. All right, Nathaniel said, his voice soft but full of realization. I understand. Maya nodded, her expression softening ever so slightly. Good. Then, without another word, she turned and left the room. Nathaniel sat there for a long moment, staring at the door she had just walked through. It was clear now that he had underestimated her. There was so much more to Maya Carter than he had ever imagined, and the more he learned, the more he realized just how little he truly knew about her. But that didn't stop him. If anything, it only made him more determined to understand. He wasn't ready to let this mystery slip away. Not now. Not when he knew there was more to uncover. As the hours passed and the sun began to set, Nathaniel's thoughts turned back to the night before. He couldn't get the image of Maya out of his head, the way she had commanded respect without ever saying a word. It was almost as if she had been living two lives, the one she showed him, and the one she kept hidden from the world. And he wanted to know everything about the second one. Nathaniel's obsession with Maya deepened in the days that followed. He tried to focus on his work, but it was impossible to shake the images of her helping those children, guiding the volunteers, and commanding the respect of people far beyond her station. Every time he saw her at the mansion, he felt an overwhelming need to know more, to peel back the layers he had ignored for so long. He couldn't stop thinking about her life outside of this mansion, the one she had kept hidden from him. His thoughts kept spiraling back to the building she had entered the previous night. He had to find out more about it. He decided to take matters into his own hands. That afternoon, after Maya left for the day, Nathaniel instructed his driver to take him to the address Maya had walked to, the rundown building in Compton. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her story than she had let on, something that tied her to a world far removed from the one he knew. The ride was long, and as the city skyline faded behind him, Nathaniel couldn't help but feel out of place. He was used to the polished streets of Beverly Hills, where everything was pristine and controlled. Compton was different, gritty, raw, and full of stories he had never bothered to hear. When he arrived, he parked his car a few blocks away, not wanting to draw attention to himself. He walked through the streets, his eyes scanning the surroundings, searching for answers. The building where Maya had entered stood ahead, its faded paint and broken windows telling a story of neglect and abandonment. It was a far cry from the sleek, modern architecture of his mansion. Nathaniel approached the building cautiously, trying to keep a low profile. As he got closer, he noticed people standing outside, families, kids playing, and a few adults talking among themselves. It wasn't a place of wealth or privilege. It was a community, a tight-knit one, at that. And it made Nathaniel realize just how little he knew about Maya's life. He stepped closer to the door, trying to peer inside through the cracked window, but it was no use. The curtains were drawn, and he couldn't see what was happening inside. But he heard voices, a low hum of chatter mixed with the sound of laughter. He took a deep breath, his curiosity driving him forward. Slowly, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The scene that greeted him was nothing like he had expected. The building was filled with energy, children running around, adults working together, and an unmistakable sense of purpose in the air. And there, in the middle of it all, was Maya. She was smiling, genuine, warm, and surrounded by people. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone people looked to for guidance, someone who made a difference in their lives. Maya was not just cleaning floors in a mansion. She was organizing this community, helping people who had nowhere else to turn. And Nathaniel stood there, frozen in place, watching her in awe. She wasn't the meek woman who had always kept to herself at the mansion. She was a leader, a force. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized just how wrong he had been about her. But the shock didn't stop there. Maya's presence in the building was only the surface. As he continued to watch her, he saw something even more striking, something that stopped him in his tracks. A man walked up to Maya, and as they exchanged words, Nathaniel recognized him immediately. James Carter, Maya's estranged father, the billionaire who had once ruled an empire. The shock hit Nathaniel like a wave. Maya's father was not only alive, but he was also very much involved in her life. The very same man who had disappeared from the world of business years ago, after his company collapsed in scandal. Nathaniel had heard the rumors, stories of betrayal, financial ruin, and a family torn apart, but he had never thought much of it. Now, standing in this rundown building, Nathaniel understood the truth. Maya's life wasn't some simple, ordinary existence. It was tied to a legacy, one that had been destroyed by greed and deceit. He watched as James embraced Maya, his face full of remorse and regret. It was clear that their relationship was strained, but there was something else, a deep connection, a bond that went beyond the pain of the past. And as Nathaniel stood there, hidden in the shadows, he realized that Maya was not just a woman working in his mansion. She was part of a much larger story, one that he hadn't even begun to understand, but he was determined to find out everything. Nathaniel couldn't sleep that night. His mind kept returning to the image of Maya and her father, two people whose lives had been shaped by the same world that Nathaniel had inherited but had long since forgotten. He had seen his fair share of families torn apart by wealth and ambition. But this was something different. Maya wasn't just a maid to him anymore. She was a woman caught in the remnants of a fractured empire, someone fighting for a future while trying to bury the past. The next morning, Nathaniel couldn't look at her the same way. Her presence in the mansion felt different. The familiar routine of watching her clean, watching her move through the rooms, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to what he had learned. Every time their eyes met, he could sense her walls, her guardedness, and a part of him understood it now. She wasn't hiding from him. She was hiding from everything: her family, her past, the life that had been thrust upon her. Nathaniel couldn't let it go. He needed answers, and he knew the only person who could give him those answers was Maya herself. After a long day of meetings, Nathaniel found himself standing in the hallway of the mansion, waiting for her. His heart raced as he thought about what he was about to do. This wasn't just about finding out more about Maya's past. It was about confronting his own assumptions and guilt. Maya walked into the room, her usual quiet demeanor masking the tension in her shoulders. She froze when she saw him standing there, her eyes quickly scanning the space before she looked at him. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice cool, but Nathaniel could hear the underlying tension. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than he intended. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "We need to talk." Maya's gaze hardened, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "About what?" Nathaniel hesitated. The words were harder to say than he had anticipated. "I saw you last night," he said quietly, his gaze locking with hers. "I followed you." Maya's eyes flashed with something: anger, disbelief, maybe even fear. She took a step back, her posture defensive. "You had no right." "I know," Nathaniel said quickly, his words rushing out. "But I needed to understand." I need to know why you've been hiding who you really are." Maya's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you with your father last night," he said, his voice firm but full of guilt. "I didn't know who he was at first, but I know now. I know about your family's past, Maya. I know who you really are." Maya froze, her expression unreadable. The silence between them was thick, charged with a mix of emotion. Nathaniel watched as her walls came up, tighter than before, stronger than before. "You shouldn't have followed me," she finally said, her voice low. "You shouldn't have gone digging into my past." Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean to intrude on your life, but you've been hiding so much from me, from everyone. And I had no idea who you really were. All this time I thought I knew you, and I was wrong." Maya took a step back, her eyes hardening with each word he spoke. "You don't know anything about me, Nathaniel. You never did. And I've spent my whole life trying to keep it that way." "But why?" Nathaniel asked, his voice cracking with frustration. "Why hide it? You're not just some maid. I'm not what you think." Maya cut him off, her voice rising. "I'm not some charity case. I'm not some broken woman who needs you to save her. I've fought for everything I have. Everything." The intensity in her voice hit Nathaniel like a punch to the chest. He had never seen her this angry, this vulnerable. "I never wanted your help, Nathaniel," she continued, her voice trembling now, but her anger still sharp. "I didn't need your pity. I never asked for it. And I sure as hell don't need you judging me or my family." Nathaniel felt the sting of her words, but he couldn't stop. "Maya, I'm not trying to judge you. He stopped, his heart pounding. "I just want to understand. I want to know who you are. All of you. Not just the part you let me see." Maya shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with something he couldn't name. "You don't get it, Nathaniel. You'll never get it." She turned to leave, but Nathaniel stepped in her way, blocking her path. "Maya," he said, his voice soft but desperate. "Please, just talk to me. Let me in." For a moment, there was silence. Maya stood there, her eyes flicking between him and the door. Nathaniel could see the war inside her. She was battling herself, her instincts, her pride, her trust. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh and looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not the woman you think I am. I'm not your maid. I'm not just your help. You'll never understand my life, or my choices, and I won't let you try." With that, she brushed past him and left the room, leaving Nathaniel standing there, his heart heavy with confusion and regret. He had crossed a line, he realized. He had thought he was helping her, but in the end, he had only pushed her further away. But deep down, he knew that the real truth was still out there. And he wouldn't stop until he uncovered it, no matter how much it hurt. The next few days felt like a blur. Nathaniel couldn't focus on anything: his meetings, his business deals, his usual distractions. His mind kept drifting back to Maya, to their confrontation, to the fire in her eyes when she had told him he'd never understand her. The look of someone who had been hurt too many times to trust again. Nathaniel's thoughts kept returning to the same question. What was Maya hiding? Why had she built such walls around herself? Was she really as closed off as she seemed? Or was there something more? But he didn't have the answers yet, and each moment without them gnawed at him. He wanted to respect her space, but at the same time, he couldn't let her shut him out completely. She was a puzzle, one he couldn't stop trying to solve. It was late one night when Nathaniel found himself at the edge of the property, staring out over the city lights of Beverly Hills, trying to clear his head. He hadn't seen Maya since their argument. The house had been quieter without her. Too quiet. Too sterile. He had grown used to the presence of her soft footsteps, the murmur of her voice when she asked if he wanted anything. But now, everything felt off. He needed to fix things, but didn't know how. The next morning, Nathaniel woke to the sound of the doorbell ringing. He glanced at the clock, 8 o'clock a.m. The house staff was normally busy by now, so it was odd to have someone at the door so early. He opened it, surprised to see Maya, standing outside in a simple jacket, her eyes focused on the ground, her expression unreadable. "Maya?" Nathaniel asked, his voice hesitant. She didn't look up at him immediately, but instead glanced behind her, as if checking to make sure no one else was watching. Then, after a long pause, she finally spoke. "I've decided," she said softly. "I'm leaving." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, leaving?" He stepped toward her, the words feeling heavier than he had anticipated. "Where are you going? Why?" Maya's gaze lifted finally, her eyes weary but firm. "I can't keep doing this, Nathaniel. I can't keep pretending that I'm just your maid. I don't belong here, and I never did. This place, your world." She motioned around the mansion. "It's not mine. It never was." Nathaniel felt a pang of regret, of guilt, flooding through him. He had pushed her too hard, demanded answers when she wasn't ready to give them. And now, he might be losing her altogether. "Maya." He stepped forward, reaching out as if to stop her, but she took a step back. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "You're used to controlling everything around you, but you can't control this. I have my own life, my own fight. I've been fighting it for years, and I can't let it go because of what you think of me." Nathaniel's mind raced. "Please, Maya. I don't want you to leave. He stopped, trying to find the right words. "I never meant to make you feel like you don't belong. You belong here, with me, more than you know." Maya shook her head, her expression pained. "I don't belong here, Nathaniel. I belong in the world I've created for myself. I have people who need me, and I'm not going to abandon them just because it's uncomfortable for you." The truth hit him like a brick. She wasn't just running away from him. She was running towards something much more meaningful, something that had nothing to do with him. Maya wasn't the problem. It was his own assumptions, his own guilt that had driven him to try and claim a piece of her that wasn't his to take. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel whispered, his voice thick with regret. "I never understood." She gave him a small, sad smile, the kind of smile someone gives when they've finally made peace with something they know can't be changed. "I know," Maya said, her voice soft but resolute. "But you will. Eventually." Without another word, she turned and walked away from him, disappearing down the long driveway. Nathaniel stood there, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He watched her go, the pain of their fractured connections settling into his bones. Hours passed. But Nathaniel couldn't move. His mind kept returning to the things Maya had said, about belonging, about her fight. And he realized that he hadn't been the person she needed him to be. He hadn't seen her for who she truly was. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just let her go without trying to make things right. He couldn't allow her to disappear into the shadows of her past without offering her the chance to be seen. And that meant he had to step out of his own world and into hers. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, his heart set on one thing: finding Maya and apologizing, truly apologizing, before it was too late. Nathaniel's drive through the city felt almost surreal. The streets, which he'd traveled countless times in his luxurious car, now seemed unfamiliar. Everything felt off. Like the world around him had shifted, and he was no longer in control. His mind kept replaying Maya's words, how she had told him that he didn't understand, that he would never understand. He had thought he knew what he wanted, his empire, his rules, his life. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. The further he drove, the more the world around him transformed. The towering skyscrapers of Beverly Hills gave way to quieter streets, the homes less extravagant, the people on the sidewalks more diverse. He hadn't ventured much outside his bubble, and now he found himself uncomfortably aware of that. Finally, after what felt like hours, Nathaniel reached the building he'd seen Maya walk into before. It was just as run down as he remembered. The faded paint, the cracked windows, and the buzzing neon sign hanging crookedly on the side of the building made it look like a relic of another time. But this wasn't just any building. It was her world, the one she had tried to shield him from. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the way on foot, his hands trembling slightly as he approached the entrance. He was nervous, but more than that, he was determined. Maya had left the mansion without looking back, but Nathaniel wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. He stepped inside, the musty air hitting him as soon as he entered. The low hum of voices filled the space, but there was a warmth here, something genuine. It wasn't the cold, calculated atmosphere of his world. It was raw, real, and undeniably alive. He walked through the hallways, past people talking and laughing, until he reached the back of the building where he had seen Maya before. The scene in front of him was almost like a small community, a place where people were coming together to support each other. Maya was in the middle of it all, giving directions, smiling as she handed out food to the children running around her. Nathaniel hesitated, watching her with a sense of awe. This wasn't the woman he thought he knew. She wasn't just cleaning his mansion. She was leading something far more important, something that made a real difference in the lives of people who had no other way to survive. Maya caught sight of him standing in the doorway, and her expression immediately hardened. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes was enough to tell him everything he needed to know. She wasn't happy to see him here. Nathaniel took a deep breath, stepping forward. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "I shouldn't have followed you. I shouldn't have pushed you. I had no idea who you really were." Maya crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What do you want from me, Nathaniel?" "I want to understand," he said, his voice low, full of emotion. "I want to understand your life, Maya. Not just the part you let me see, but everything. All of it." She shook her head, her eyes flicking to the children nearby, to the people she was helping. "This isn't your world, Nathaniel. You don't belong here. And neither do I. Not in your world." Her voice was soft but firm, her gaze never leaving him. "I've fought my whole life to build something real, something that matters. You don't understand that." "I know I don't," Nathaniel said, stepping closer. "But I want to learn. I want to be part of this. Part of you. If you'll let me." Maya's eyes softened just a little. "You can't just step into this world like it's some charity project. It's not that simple." I know it's not simple, but I'm willing to try." For the first time since he'd arrived, Maya seemed to consider his words. The walls she had built around herself softened, just slightly. "You've always seen me as just your maid," she said quietly. "A woman who's here to clean your floors and serve your coffee. But I'm more than that, Nathaniel. And you need to see that." Nathaniel nodded, his heart racing. "I see you. I see everything you've done. You're more than anything I imagined." She met his gaze, her eyes intense. "Then why are you here? Why follow me, if you think you know everything already?" "Because I was wrong," he admitted, his voice steady but filled with vulnerability. "I didn't see you for who you really were. I've spent so long living in my bubble, thinking I had all the answers, that I never bothered to look outside of it. And now, I'm ready to listen, to learn. If you'll let me." For a long moment, Maya didn't speak. The air between them was thick with emotion. Nathaniel could see the hesitation in her eyes, but also something else. A spark of hope, maybe, or the faintest glimmer of possibility. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't need you to fix me, Nathaniel. I don't need you to save me. But maybe we can figure this out together. But only if you're really willing to see me. All of me." Nathaniel's heart surged. "I am. I swear it." Maya nodded, her expression softening. She didn't say anything else. But the tension in the air shifted, just a little. It wasn't the resolution he had hoped for, but it was something. It was a start. He stood there for a few more moments, watching as Maya returned to her work, her natural leadership taking over again as she helped organize the people around her. Nathaniel stayed back, quietly observing, still trying to grasp the enormity of what he had just witnessed. She was right. This was her world, and if he wanted to be a part of it, he had a long way to go. Nathaniel spent the next few days in a haze, trying to process the conversation he'd had with Maya. He had seen the cracks in her walls, the flicker of something more than just the maid he had assumed her to be. She was powerful, independent, and fiercely protective of the life she had carved out for herself, far removed from the wealth and expectations that defined his world. But there was a part of him that still couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done learning about her. There were still pieces of her story that didn't quite add up, still parts of her past that she was holding back, and he couldn't let go of the desire to understand it all. However, it wasn't long before he realized that his desire to understand her wasn't going to be the only obstacle in his way. There were others, people who had been in Maya's life far longer than he had, people who didn't share his growing respect for her. The first sign of trouble came when Nathaniel received a call from his mother, Catherine Davis. Her voice was smooth, as always, but there was an unmistakable edge of concern in her tone. "Nathaniel," she began, her words sharp. "I think it's time we have a conversation about the help." He felt a tightening in his chest. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," she said, her voice turning colder. "This whole situation with Maya, it's becoming inappropriate. You can't just keep her around like this. People are talking. You're getting too involved with someone beneath you, and it's damaging your reputation." Nathaniel felt his stomach drop. His mother's words weren't new to him, but this time they hit differently. He had never been one to care about appearances, but with Maya, it was different. There was something about her that made him care more than he should, something that made him want to protect her, even from the people who had controlled his life for so long. "I'm not worried about my reputation, Mother," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm more concerned with doing what's right." "You think you're doing what's right, but you're blinded by your emotions. This is not the life for you, Nathaniel. You can't let her drag you down into her world of poverty and chaos." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He could feel the anger rising in him. "That's not who she is, and you don't know anything about her. Don't judge her based on where she's from or what you think you know." Catherine scoffed. "Don't make excuses for her. She's nobody. You need to let her go before things spiral even further. You have too much to lose." Nathaniel slammed his hand down on the desk, the force of the movement surprising him. "I don't have anything to lose. Not if it means losing myself in the process." He paused, breathing heavily. "I don't care what you think, Mom. This is my life." "Fine," Catherine snapped, her voice cold and final. "But when everything falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you." The line went dead, leaving Nathaniel with a sense of emptiness. It wasn't just his mother's disapproval that bothered him. It was the fact that she had always been the one person who controlled his choices, who guided him. He had spent his whole life under her thumb, adhering to her idea of what his life should look like. But with Maya, he had finally started to step away from that, and it scared him how much he was willing to sacrifice to hold on to that freedom. The second blow came the following day, when Maya received an unexpected visit from her family. Nathaniel was at his desk when he saw her leave the mansion, her face tense, her body language tight. He hadn't seen her this upset in a long time. Without thinking, he followed her, not knowing what to expect. He caught up to her just as she entered a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. From the street, he watched as a man and a woman greeted her warmly, their presence too familiar. They were Maya's parents, two figures from her past that she had tried to keep hidden. Her father, Richard Carter, was the first to speak, his face lined with years of hard living and regret. He was the reason Maya had turned away from the family she had once known, the man who had lost everything to his own greed and mistakes. "Maya," he said, his voice gentle but authoritative. "We need to talk." Maya crossed her arms defensively. "I don't want anything to do with you." "You can't run from us forever," her mother, Evelyn Carter, added coldly. "You can't keep pretending that your life in that mansion is real. We're your family. You need to come home." "Home?" Maya's voice was sharp, almost cutting. "You're not my family. Not anymore. Not after what you did." Nathaniel stood outside the cafe, hidden from view, his heart aching for Maya. She had clearly worked so hard to distance herself from her family's toxic influence, but here they were again, dragging her back into the web of lies and betrayal she had tried so hard to escape. Her father reached out, but Maya stepped back, shaking her head. "I'm not coming back to you. I've built my life here. I have a purpose here." Her mother's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. You don't know what's at stake. We're offering you a chance to make it all right again. You're not meant to be here. You're meant to be with us." Maya's expression hardened. "No, I'm not. I don't belong in that world anymore." Nathaniel felt a wave of anger wash over him. He wanted to rush in and confront Maya's family, tell them to leave her alone, to let her live the life she had chosen. But he stayed in the shadows, knowing it wasn't his place. Maya had to fight this battle herself. As the conversation ended, Maya left the cafe, her face pale, her shoulders slumped. She didn't see Nathaniel as she walked past him, lost in her thoughts. But Nathaniel saw everything. The way her family had tried to manipulate her, the way they had offered her a life she no longer wanted. Maya was stronger than he had realized, but she was also scarred, weighed down by a past that she couldn't escape. And Nathaniel knew that if he truly wanted to be a part of her life, he would have to prove that he was more than just a billionaire who was willing to follow her wherever she went. He would have to fight for her, just like she had fought for herself. The following days were marked by a quiet tension between Nathaniel and Maya. She still came to work, but her usual composed demeanor had shifted. Her eyes were distant, her movements slower than usual, as if every step was weighed down by the conversations she had had with her family. Nathaniel could see it, the sadness in her eyes, the exhaustion that clung to her every moment. He knew she was dealing with things far bigger than him. The family she had tried to escape, the life she had worked so hard to build, now felt like it was all slipping away. And no matter how hard she tried to hide it, Nathaniel saw the cracks. One evening, he found himself standing in the mansion's vast hallway, his thoughts tangled in a mess of guilt and confusion. He had made mistakes. He had pushed Maya too hard, too fast. He'd expected her to open up to him on his terms, without understanding her journey or the weight of her past. The realization hit him like a slap in the face. Maya was strong, yes, but she was also vulnerable, and he had failed to see that until now. The soft sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts, and he turned to see Maya walking toward him. She was wearing her usual uniform, but there was something different in her posture tonight, something heavier, as if the world itself had been laid on her shoulders. "Maya," Nathaniel said, his voice soft, trying to keep the urgency in his tone at bay. She stopped a few feet from him, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" "Nathaniel." There was a certain coldness in her voice, a distance that hadn't been there before. Nathaniel felt his heart sink. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping closer, his voice full of remorse. "I know I've pushed you. I've made things harder for you, and I should have known better." Maya's eyes narrowed, and she took a step back, crossing her arms. "You can't just apologize for everything, Nathaniel. You can't just fix everything with a few words." "I don't want to fix you, Maya," Nathaniel said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I want to understand you. I want to be with you. But I know I haven't made that easy. I haven't made it clear that I'm here, that I want to help you. But I don't know how to do it without overstepping." Maya's jaw tightened, and she looked away, biting her lip. "I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask for any of this." Her voice cracked, and Nathaniel saw the vulnerability she was so desperate to hide. The silence between them was thick, both of them searching for words that could heal the rift they had unknowingly created. Nathaniel stepped closer, his heart aching for her. "I know you didn't ask for it," he said quietly. "But I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I see you, Maya. I see all for you, and I'm not going anywhere." Maya's eyes softened, and for a moment, Nathaniel thought she might finally let her guard down. But then she looked away, as if the weight of the world was pressing on her chest. "I don't belong in your world, Nathaniel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've spent my whole life trying to survive in a world that doesn't care about people like me." "And you're right. Maybe I've been running from my past. But you're not the one who can fix me, and I'm not the woman who can be fixed." Nathaniel felt the truth of her words hit him hard. She was right. She wasn't broken. She didn't need fixing. But she needed space, time, and trust. And he had given her none of that. "I'm not trying to fix you, Maya," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want to be part of your life. I don't want to change you. I just want to be here for you, however you need me." Maya stood still, her arms crossed tightly, her body rigid with tension. "I don't need you, Nathaniel. I never have." The words stung more than Nathaniel expected, but he didn't pull back. He stood there, letting the pain of her rejection wash over him, trying to understand where this was coming from. For a long moment, Maya didn't speak, her eyes locked on the floor. It was clear she was fighting with herself, fighting the desire to let someone in, to trust someone again, after all the hurt and betrayal she had experienced in her life. Nathaniel understood that now. He understood that her walls weren't just built to keep him out. They were built to keep out a world that had failed her time and time again. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter, but no less firm. "I can't give you what you want, Nathaniel. Not now. Not ever. My life doesn't work that way. I'm not the kind of woman who fits into your world of billion-dollar deals and gala events." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, and Nathaniel took a step back, realizing the weight of what she was saying. She wasn't rejecting him. She was rejecting the life he represented. The world that had always been his, but that she had never truly been a part of. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice strained. "I can't do this. Not with you." With that, Maya turned and walked away, leaving Nathaniel standing in the hall, staring after her, feeling the walls he had so carefully built around his emotions come crashing down. Nathaniel spent the rest of the evening lost in his thoughts, replaying Maya's words over and over in his mind. He had always prided himself on his ability to solve problems, to fix what was broken, but for the first time, he was confronted with something that couldn't be fixed with money, influence, or persistence. Maya wasn't a puzzle to solve. She was a person with scars, with a past that had shaped her into who she was, and he had been blind to that. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something. Maya wasn't pushing him away because of who he was. She was pushing him away because of who she was, someone who had spent her whole life protecting herself from the world, and in his pursuit of her, he had failed to see that. The next morning, Nathaniel woke up to a still, quiet house. Maya's absence was palpable in the emptiness of the mansion. He had no idea where she had gone, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he would ever see her again. He had spent so long building his empire, accumulating wealth and status, but it had never occurred to him that the people in his life, his true life, were more important than the things he could control. And Maya, the woman who had taught him that lesson without even knowing it, had slipped away from him. Nathaniel knew he couldn't just let her walk away. He had been wrong to think he could fix her or bring her into his world, but he had also realized that he couldn't walk away from her either. Not now. Not when the connection between them was something deeper than either of them had expected. That afternoon, Nathaniel found himself standing in front of his office window, looking out at the city below. He had to make things right, but he wasn't sure how. All he knew was that he had to do something, anything, to make Maya understand that he was willing to step into her world, to see things through her eyes. Just then, his phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Maya. The words were simple, but they hit him harder than he had expected. "I need to talk." Nathaniel's heart leaped in his chest. He immediately texted back, "Where are you?" Within moments, Maya responded, "Meet me at the coffee shop on Maple Street." Nathaniel's stomach tightened as he grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door, eager to get to her. When Nathaniel arrived at the coffee shop, Maya was sitting at a corner table, her face tired but determined. She didn't look up when he entered, and for a moment, he just stood there, watching her. Maya had always been the type of person to keep her emotions close, but now, there was something different in the way she carried herself. Something raw, something vulnerable. He walked over slowly, taking the seat across from her without saying a word. They sat in silence for a few moments, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I shouldn't have pushed you away the way I did." Nathaniel nodded, his voice just as soft. "No, you were right. I pushed too hard and I didn't listen. I've spent my life thinking I could fix everything, but I see now that I was wrong." Maya's eyes softened, but there was a sadness behind them that made Nathaniel's heart ache. "You don't need to fix me, Nathaniel. I've spent my whole life fixing myself. I'm not broken, and I don't need saving." "I never thought you were broken," Nathaniel said quickly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But I do want to be there for you. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me." Maya looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. It felt like time was suspended in the space between them, the weight of their shared history and the distance they had traveled to get here hanging in the air. "I'm not asking you to change your life for me," Maya said quietly. I need you to see me for who I really am, not the woman you think I am, or the woman I was when I started working for you." Nathaniel squeezed her hand, his heart beating faster now. "I see you, Maya. I see all of you, and I want to be there, not because I want to fix anything, but because I care about you." Maya's lips parted, and for the first time in days, Nathaniel saw the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I've been running from this for so long," she whispered. "Running from the life I left behind, from everything that's happened. I never thought I could let anyone in again. But maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to think that I could let you in." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice sincere. "You don't have to run anymore, Maya. I'll be here, however long it takes." She looked at him, her expression softening, and for the first time, Nathaniel saw something in her eyes that he had only glimpsed in fleeting moments before. Trust, hope, and maybe, just maybe, love. In the following days, things between Nathaniel and Maya began to shift. Their conversations, once strained, became more open, more real. Maya no longer looked at him with the same guarded expression. Instead, she shared her thoughts, her fears, and her dreams. Nathaniel found himself listening, really listening, to everything she had to say. And for the first time, he truly understood the depth of her strength. The strength that had carried her through a life full of hardships. The strength that had made her resilient and independent, despite the odds stacked against her. But even as their connection deepened, Maya's past still loomed over them, threatening to pull them apart. It wasn't long before Nathaniel realized that while he had been offering his support, it wasn't enough. Maya needed to be free from the shadows of her family, free from the expectations they had placed on her. She needed to make her own choices, her own path, without the constant weight of the past holding her back. And Nathaniel would do whatever it took to help her do that.